Right. So welcome everybody to our community conversation featuring writer Alex Gino. My name is Marty Ackett, and I'm the adult programming coordinator for the library. And I just have to thank the Kulisheks. They are the ones who pay for our community conversation series. So we wouldn't have Alex Gino here tonight if it weren't for the Kulisheks. So if you're here tonight or watching this after the fact, please keep them in mind. They are wonderful, wonderful contributors here at Peter White Public Library. Just a few things that are upcoming in case you are interested. Tomorrow night we have our Blues Day Tuesday, which is going to be Harp, Heart, and Bones. And then on Wednesday we have Tyler Tischler, an author who is going to be talking about Gothic literature up in the Shiras Room at 7 p.m. And then on Friday we are going to be screening as part of our Blockbusting Cinema series, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, at noon here in the community room. So I'm just going to do a little introduction because you're really not here to hear me speak. You're here to hear Alex speak. So I'll just give you a little introduction about Alex, Alex Gino, and this comes right from their website. So Alex Gino loves glitter, ice cream, gardening, awful puns, and awful with an A-W-E, awful puns, and stories that reflect the complexity of being alive. They would take a quiet coffee date with a friend over a loud and crowded dinner party any day. A former LSAT, I had to look that up. That is a law school admissions test tutor, which sounds like a horrible job to me, but but they were an LSAT tutor who never touched law school, but Alex can still talk your ear off about sufficient and necessary conditions. So Alex has been writing stories since before they knew the alphabet, dictating stories to their parents. They have always considered themselves a writer, but it wasn't until 2014 with the sale of Melissa that they had any idea that authoring books would be how they make their way in the world. They are grateful for the ability to spend their time and energy on something so close to their heart. Since publishing Melissa in 2015, pardon me, Melissa won several awards, the Children's Stonewall Award, the Lambda Literary Award, and the Children's Choice Book Award. But they've also published You Don't Know Everything, Jilly P, Rick, Alice, Austin Lived Here, and just published this month at the beginning of October, Green, which came out on October 3rd. Alex was born and raised in Staten Island, New York, and Alex has lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Brooklyn, New York, Astoria, Queens, New York, Northampton, Massachusetts, lots of other places. They have even went on an 18-month road trip across 44 states. So they are now happy to be back in Western Massachusetts with Thunder the Wonder Cat. So maybe we'll hear about Thunder the Wonder Cat later. But anyway, please welcome to Peter White Public Library, Alex Gino.
You will probably hear from Thunder the Wonder Cat at some point because he will decide that he doesn't have something that he needs because he's special. He's a Wonder Cat. So hi, my name is Alex. I get to write books for kids, and that is my job in the world. While I do write for kids, or rather, since I do write for kids, I'm aware that of the importance of being succinct. And so rather than give a 40-minute long talk in which you would be sad and bored and unhappy and squirmy, just like a second grader, I would be. What I want to do is do a little read for you, because that's what I was asked to do. I want to read from Melissa, and then I want to talk a little bit, and then I'll probably read a little bit from Green, and then I'm warning you now that we're going to open up to question and answers. So you're going to need to provide questions unless you want me to talk about necessary and sufficient conditions, which to me are fascinating. And I can talk about them all day long because it's the nuance and the minutia and the content doesn't matter. You just have to figure out whether it's true or not. That's what I have to say about LSAT. So this is a book called Melissa. It's about a girl who is transgender, and no one knows that except her at the beginning of the book. And it's a book about figuring out how to tell people who you are when who you are isn't who they expect you to be. And in 2023, it it hopefully is in some ways starting to show its age, but also it's showing how vitally important it is to have. So, chapter 1, Secrets. George pulled a silver house key out of the smallest pocket of a large red backpack. Mom had sewn the key in so that it wouldn't get lost, but the yarn wasn't quite long enough to reach the keyhole if the bag rested on the ground. Instead, George had to steady herself awkwardly on one foot while the backpack rested on her other knee. She wiggled the key until it clicked into place. Stumbling inside, she called out, "Hello?" No lights were on. Still, George needed to be certain the house was empty. The doors of Mom's room were open and the bed sheets were flat. Scott's room was unoccupied as well. Sure that she was alone, George went into the third bedroom, opened the closet door, and surveyed the pile of stuffed animals and assorted toys inside. They were undisturbed. Mom complained that George hadn't played with any of the toys in years, and said that they should be donated to needy families. But George knew they were needed here to guard her most prized and secret collection. Fishing beneath the teddy bears and fluffy bunnies, George felt for a flat denim bag. Once she had it in hand, she ran to the bathroom, shut the door, and turned the lock. Clutching the bag in tightly wrapped arms, George slid to the ground. As she tipped the denim bag on its side, the silky, slippery pages of a dozen magazines fell out onto the tiled bathroom floor. Covers promised how to have perfect skin, 12 fresh summer haircuts, how to tell a hottie you like him, and wild winter wardrobes. George was only a few years younger than the girls smiling at her from the glossy pages. She thought of them as her friends. George picked up an issue from last April that she had looked through countless times before. She browsed the busy pages with a crisp flip, flip, flip that stirred up the faint smell of paper. She paused on a photo of 4 girls at the beach. They modeled swimsuits in a line, each striking a pose. A guide on the right-hand side of the page recommended various styles based on body type. The bodies looked the same to George. They were all girls' bodies. On the next page, 2 girls sat laughing on a blanket, their arms around each other's shoulders. One wore a striped bikini. The other wore a polka dot one-piece with cutouts at the hips. If George were there, she would fit right in, giggling and linking her arms in theirs. She would wear a bright pink bikini, and she would have long hair that her new friends would love to braid. They would ask her name, and she would tell them, "My name is Melissa." Melissa was the name she called herself in the mirror when no one was watching, and she could brush her flat reddish-brown hair to the front of her head as if she had bangs. George flipped past flashy ads for book bag organizers, nail polish, the latest phones, and even tampons. She skipped over an article on how to make your own bracelets and another on advice for talking to boys. George's magazine collection had started by accident. 2 summers ago, she had noticed an old issue of Girl's Life in the recycling bin at the library. The word girl had caught her eye instantly, and she had slipped the magazine in her jacket to look at later. Another girl's magazine soon followed, this time rescued from a trash can down the block from her house. The very next weekend, she had found the denim bag at a yard sale for a quarter. It was just the size of a magazine and had a zipper along the top. It was as if the universe had wanted her to be able to store her collection safely. George settled on a 2-page spread about framing your face with makeup. George had never worn makeup, but she pored over the range of colors on the left side of the page. Her heart raced in her chest. She wondered what it would feel like to really wear lipstick. George loved to put on chapstick. She used it all winter, whether or not her lips were really chapped. and every spring she hid the tube from Mom and wore it until it wore out. George jumped when she heard a clatter outside. She looked out the window to the front door directly below. No one was in sight, but Scott's bike lay in the driveway, the back wheels still spinning. Scott's bike? That meant Scott. Scott was George's older brother, a high school freshman. The hair on George's neck stood up. Soon, heavy footsteps climbed the stairs to the second floor. The locked bathroom door rattled. It was as if Scott were rattling George's heart inside her ribcage. Bang, bang, bang. You in there, George? Yeah. The shiny magazines were spread across the tile floor. She gathered them into a pile and stuffed them into the denim bag. Her heart was thumping almost as loud as Scott's foot against the door. Yo, bro, I gotta go, Scott yelled from the far side. George zipped up the bag as quietly as she could and looked for a place to stash it. She couldn't walk out with it. George would want to know what was inside. The bathroom's one cabinet was stuffed with towels and didn't shut all the way. No good either. Finally, she hung the bag from the shower head and closed the curtain, desperately hoping this wouldn't be the moment Scott discovered personal hygiene. Scott rushed in as soon as George opened the door, unzipping his jeans before he reached the toilet. George exited quickly, closed the door, and leaned on the wall outside to catch her breath. The bag was probably still swinging in the shower. George hoped it wouldn't hit against the curtain or worse, fall and land in the bathtub with a thud. George didn't want to be standing near the bathroom when Scott came out, so she went down to the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of orange juice and sat at the table, her skin tingling. Outside, a cloud passed overhead, and the room grew darker. When the bathroom door banged open, George jumped in her seat, splashing juice on her hand. She realized she had barely been breathing. Thump, 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 thump. Scott tromped downstairs, a DVD case in his hand. He opened the refrigerator door, pulled out the carton of orange juice, and took a long swig. He wore a thin black t-shirt and jeans with a small hole in the knee. He hadn't gotten a haircut in months, and his dark brown curls formed a mop on his head. Sorry if I busted in on you while you were taking a dump. Scott wiped the juice off his lips with his bare forearm. I wasn't taking a dump, George said. Then what took you so long? George hesitated. Oh, I know, Scott said. I bet you had a magazine in there. George froze, her mouth half open, and her brain mid-thought. The air felt warm and her mind swirled. She put her hands on the table to make sure she was still there. That's it. Scott grinned, oblivious to George's panic. That's my little bro, growing up and looking at dirty magazines. Oh, George said out loud. She knew what dirty magazines were. She almost laughed. The girls in the magazines she was looking at wore a lot more clothes than that, even the ones at the beach. George relaxed, at least a little. Don't worry, George, I won't tell Mom. Anyway, I'm heading back out. Just had to get this. Scott shook the black plastic box he held in his hand, and the DVD inside rattled. Haven't even seen it yet, but it's supposed to be classic. It's German. The title means something like The Blood of Evil. And when the zombies gnaw this one guy's arm off and kill him, the other guy has to use the gnawed off arm of his dead best friend to fight the zombies. It's awesome. It sounds gross, George said. It is, Scott nodded enthusiastically. He took another gulp of orange juice, put the carton back into the fridge, and headed for the door. I'll let you get back to thinking about girls, Scott joked on the way out. George dashed up to the bathroom, rescued her bag, and buried it deep inside her closet, under the toys and stuffed animals. She put a pile of dirty clothes on top, just in case. Then she closed the door and collapsed face first onto her bed, her hands crossed over her head, pressing her elbows to her ears and wishing she were someone else. Anyone else. Right? So that's the first chapter of Melissa. Well, thank you. It came out in 2015. And I knew at the time that it was going to get challenged. Right? Of course it was going to get challenged. Of course it was going to get banned places. Like, where was it going to get challenged first was really the question. And I realize it's actually a lot more vague than that. You can't figure out where it's been challenged first, because what is a challenge? There's so many gray areas where a book doesn't enter a library that it should. There are gray areas where a book doesn't get published when it could. My book was the first book by a trans person for a middle grade audience about a trans person. And before that, there hadn't been any. So the only reason my book wasn't banned or challenged until 2015 or 2016 is when it really started hitting lists and things, is because it didn't exist at all. It had been banned by everything before that, right? In a different way. And as culture shifted and caught up to this book that I had been working on since 2003 and didn't think it was going to go anywhere, all of a sudden there was a market for it. There was a place for it to go. And Scholastic picked it up and took it and ran with it in good ways. They don't do everything right, but they did this right. And it's definitely an issue of timing, that we were hitting a point in culture where things were shifting, where more people realized that trans kids exist and deserve the kind of literature that, frankly, I didn't get and people my age didn't get. And so, like, it's terrible. Book bannings are awful. They are about fear. They're about using children as proxy in a culture war. I am not proud to be banned or challenged. But it is a sign of progress that I was challenged at all, because it means that the book exists and it got found. And the reasons for the challenges have been very interesting and have shifted over the years. Right, the first year, ALA recorded the reasons, and a lot of the reasons was because there was a trans kid in it. And that didn't fly as well as a lot of people maybe thought it would. They'd be like, oh, the trans person in it, oh no, freak out. And the larger response from a lot of people was like, okay, yeah, great, there's a trans kid in it. And that's when it shifted to things like, well, two of them that I showed you in chapter 1. The big one is dirty magazines. People freaked out about that. And the thing is third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders are very used to not knowing what's in a book. So if they see something in a book and they don't recognize it, I promise you, they don't go to the dictionary. They don't ask someone. They ignore it because they don't want to have to look it up. And if they do know what a dirty magazine is, it's kind of funny. And third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders are used to not catching everything in a story. The other one that really upset me is that there were people who were upset who complained that I mentioned tampons. And now that's some body shaming right there, because half of the world uses tampons or a similar device, and the other half probably, hopefully, loves someone who does somewhere in their life. So to say that that's a bad thing is really icky and gross. Which is when I kind of realized that it doesn't matter what I write. People who don't want kids to experience things in the world that they didn't experience growing up, that they think are frightening because they didn't experience them growing up, they're going to find something to be upset about. So if I censor myself, if I stop what I'm writing because I'm worried about how it will be seen, well, that's me doing their work for them. And I refuse to do that. I also refuse to write one queer kid who gets to exist anymore, right? Melissa has friends, has supportive people, but she doesn't have community the way that we deserve community. And so before I launch into questions and answers, hint, hint, I want to just read a couple of pages from Green, which came out this year, and maybe you'll see a little bit of a difference. So Green is in the same world as Melissa. Green is in 7th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 7th grade. Rick was in 6th grade. And this is the beginning of chapter 1. Saintly carrots. Green's life was pretty great, especially for a kid in middle school. They were queer and non-binary, and had lots of queer and trans friends. Pretty much everyone used their name and pronouns, and they felt mostly comfortable with their body the way it was. They didn't have a nemesis or a bully or anything like that, and most of their teachers were at least halfway decent, if not rather good. Their family was small, just them and Dad at home, but Dad was way closer to awesome than awful. Yep, the going was great for Green Gibson. One of the best parts in Green's day was lunch with kids from the Rainbow Spectrum, Jung Middle School's group for LGBTQIAP plus students and issues. Not that everyone from the group ate lunch together, but Green, Rick, Ronnie, Melissa, Kelly, Layla, and sometimes a few other kids could be found at the same table most days, sharing laughs and snacks. Green was first at the table that day, pulling a peanut butter sandwich, 3 clementines, and a juice box out of their red reusable lunch bag, same as usual. They wondered where Ronnie was and spotted him and his signature pink sneakers by the lunchroom cashier. He had reddish brown hair that fell in light curls around his soft white face. Ronnie's fourth period teacher often let the class out a little early. Most days he got to the table before Green, especially if Green had to go to the bathroom. Green used the gender-neutral one in the nurse's office, which was out of the way, but it was also a private stall that never had a line. "Don't you ever get bored of the same thing every day?" Ronnie asked as he plunked down a plastic tray that held a cheeseburger in a silver pouch and a pile of waterlogged carrot slices mixed with waterlogged cauliflower florets. "I'd rather be bored of my lunch than frightened by it," Green said. Ronnie put a white napkin over his still wrapped burger and held it as if he were hovering it in the air. "Ooh, I am a scary burger ghost." Green pointed down at the veggies. "I was referring to those. I wonder what they did to deserve that punishment. It looks personal. I bet they knew the cook's big secret. Or they had some secret the cooks were trying to get out of them." Green mimed holding a bunch of carrots by their stalk and affected a growly, stern voice. "You will tell us all you know, or we will dump you into the boiling water. Mwahaha." Ronnie laughed. "It looks like they took their secret to the grave." He poked at his vegetables with a plastic fork before unwrapping his burger and taking a bite. "The burger's pretty good, though. And full of vitamins," Green joked. Ronnie shrugged. "Want a clementine?" "Sure." After Green passed it over, Ronnie put it to the side of his tray. But Green knew he would eat it soon enough. Ronnie always shrugged when Green offered him a clementine, but he always ate it. That was why Green brought 3, one for himself, one to share with the group, and one for Ronnie. Green would have been happy to joke with Ronnie the whole lunch period, but then Layla, a short Latina American girl with straight, long, jet black hair, joined them, agreeing that the carrots and cauliflower had suffered for some great sin. Melissa, a freckle-faced white girl with a round nose and long brown hair held back with barrettes, arrived soon after. And with Melissa, of course, came her BFF Kelly, an exuberant biracial black girl with her hair in 2 thick twists. Melissa sat down next to Layla, her girlfriend, and kissed her on the cheek. Green wondered what it would be like to kiss someone on the cheek when you saw them. Kelly held out a plastic container with 3 parts. In one was a homemade spread. Sliced pita strips filled the second, and the pile of neatly cut carrot sticks rounded out the meal. Layla passed, but Ronnie and Green each took a carrot stick and dipped it lightly into the garlicky mixture. Melissa, who had tasted Kelly's dad's hummus before, grabbed a big scoop with a pita slice. "Not bad," said Green. "And these carrots must have been saints," exclaimed Ronnie. Green and Ronnie laughed, but the rest of the table, even Layla, who had been there for the end of the carrot consequences conversation, looked at them oddly. They high-fived, and Green could feel Ronnie's warm, soft palm against their own. So that's different, right? Went from having a kid who gets to exist to having a kid who thrives in community. And their problem isn't, "Oh my gosh, they are queer. How can they handle it?" Their problem is they have a crush. Right? They are clearly, Ronnie is cute and talks about carrots. And what do you do if your crush calls themselves straight because your crush is a kid of lesbians and hasn't wanted to take over language, and so he's been like, "Oh, I don't wanna," but you're like, "Well, if you think you're straight, then are you into me?" And all of that weirdness that is very, very seventh grade and also very, very queer. So that's the things that I wanted to say and I wanted to share with you. And now I am vamping as Marty comes back up to the front
Yes,
and we move into a more Q&A kind of thing.
I'm
Does it
here.
sound fun?
I'm here. Yeah, I've got some questions here that have been submitted. The first one comes from a person named Alfonso. And it was the question is, what was the process of getting Melissa published, and what were the major roadblocks to getting it published?
Okay, so the biggest roadblock is that writing a book is hard. Writing a book is very, very hard. Furthermore, getting to the end of your first draft is not writing a book. Turns out taking a bunch of words and not just making scenes, not just making chapters, but making a full story arc that is cohesive took about 12 years for me. Conveniently for me, time wise, what I had started in 2003 as a ridiculous pet project became something that was critical for the children's lit community by the time I reached out to an agent, and I worked on it for another year. So it was polished like a stone when it went out to editors. And they picked it up, an editor at Scholastic, David Levithan, picked it up that day. And so I magically didn't have that hurdle because of the 10 years that I had done, 12 years that I had done in terms of getting it ready and then the timing that it faced. From there, um, they were very happy to work with me, and it has really been great. I mean, David Levithan is my editor, and he is he's a gay writer in his own right, and so he also believes how important it is to get these stories out.
That kind of dispels that myth of you being an overnight success or any writer being an overnight success, which is, I always find kind of, I laugh when people say that. So
Yeah, my agent calls it. Yes, no, I was an overnight success. I was an overnight 10-year success.
yeah, there you go. It just took 14 years to get there. Okay, and this question comes from Andrea. Over the past decade, LGBTQIA plus books, characters, and authors have increased dramatically. In your opinion, how has the current book banning climate impacted authors and their ability or desire to put out LGBTQIA plus content?
I think it's an issue of cause and effect. I think that the big current wave of book bans and challenges is because more queer authors have been published. So there is fear of pushback. And there is definitely fear within queer authors of, is my next story gonna get published? If I don't earn out because people don't get it to the library, is the next good book gonna happen? There are valid concerns there. But the only reason why or rather not only, but the reason why it's happening is because how much of a push there has been. I didn't have peers, right? Pretty much a decade ago. And now I do. And so there is a wave coming, but we have stronger numbers now, and we're going to continue to. And that long arc of justice that Dr. King talked about, like, if it doesn't go that way, I don't know if it goes that way, but the only way that I can exist and not like go screaming into traffic is to imagine that we are heading the right direction. And so yeah, there's fear, and that's why we keep doing it stronger.
Um, Next question comes from Eva. Um, And she asks, why do you think a book like Melissa is beneficial and important for children to read? And how do you hope a book like Melissa impacts other people?
Um, Books are how we humanize folks that we might not have personal experience with. Books are even how we humanize ourselves sometimes. So for queer and trans people, reading books that we see ourselves in is how we become real. I found the word genderqueer in a book when I was 19. Never seen it before. It took it, ate it, became it, not became it, had been it, had language for what I had been, changed everything. Phenomenal to be able to talk about yourself. Um, so right there is important. But, and also, yeah, straight people are going to read Melissa, and that's valuable. And that's valuable because when they come across queer and trans people in their life, they already have a connection point. So they go, oh, okay, I get that. That's not like weird to me. I don't have to ask this person inappropriate questions. I don't have to freak out. I don't have to resort to violence because I'm threatened by something I don't understand. Right? Trans people are, and particularly trans women of color, are at epidemic rates of violence. Because of lack of information on the part of cisgender people. So yeah, cis people, enjoy the story. Have a great time. It's fun. It's cute. The bully gets thrown up on. What else do you want from a fourth grade book? And also, what it's doing is it's humanizing trans people. And that's, to me, what's vital. I will also say if there are questions in the room, we can also intersperse them
Yeah.
because
If
just
anybody has a
saying,
question, please come on up.
maybe you
I've got
don't, but
I've got a list here, but you can feel free to come up and wrestle the mic from my hand, I guess. So the next question that I have is from, oh, I don't have a name on this one. It is, how did you initially respond when you found out that your book was getting banned after working on it for so long? And do you believe that there are some instances where books should be banned?
So I was I to quote the parrot from Aladdin, I could have died and not surprised. Right? Of course the book was going to get challenged. Of course the book was going to get banned. Of course it hurt my heart. Of course it hurt my heart that there are people out there that think that my existence and the existence of this sweet little trans girl, binary, not questioning your gender norms, just saying I'm on the other side of it, is too dangerous for you to show to children. That makes me feel monstrous and gross. Ew. It passes, but it's yucky. Um, what I will say about book bans and challenges, and I do say bans and challenges because bans act like it's something happened that from on high. Challenges is some schmo coming into a library, one schmo coming into a library and causing a stink, right? They fart, they ruin the whole air for all of us. And where was I going then? I just got upset about the book banners. The book banners and book challenges. I did want to say something about that. Oh, collections in libraries are curated by an expert that knows their population. Do I think that one individual should be able to come in and supersede that? No. If the expert has said this is appropriate for the population, it should be there. If it's not appropriate for the population, if it's not a book that's relevant, if it's not a book that serves the interests and needs of that group, it would not be there because I believe that the librarian knows what's going on in that situation. And do I think that every book is for every kid? No. But do I think that age is the primary determinant of what book is correct? Also not really. My book, I think my book is appropriate for all the ages, right? I don't think that my book is controversial in any way. But if you are going to have a book that is like heavy topics, right? You've got a picture book about a mom dying. Oh, how could you do that? Well, how could you not do that for the 4-year-old whose mom has died? And also, how could you show that to the 10-year-old who has massive anxiety about their mom dying? You don't show that book to the 10-year-old. You put it in the 4-year-old's hands. You read it with them. You read it appropriately. But that an individual can come in and supersede what the collection is as a whole and how it reflects all of the needs. No, I don't think an individual should be able to do that.
Oh, we just
An
got an amen
untrained
from the
individual.
audience. All right. Let's see. Yes. Oh, wait, we got a question from the audience. Here's Kat.
Hi there. I'm really curious about, since your books all sort of take place in this Alex Gino cinematic universe, so to speak, what is it like continuing to write characters when it's not their story anymore? So you've got Rick, you've got Melissa, and what is it like to know them so intimately and have them be in these new stories, but it's not, you're not in their heads anymore?
Thank you, Kat. In a lot of ways, it's a relief. Here's my English speech. My like to my English lecture. In order to write a book, one has to have a plot. In order to have a plot, you have to have conflict. In order to have the conflict, things have to go badly. If Melissa is the center of a second story, of a sequel, in a world in which she's about to transition, that implies that the transition goes badly. It also implies that the transition is any of cisgender's people's business to be looking at. So I was pretty adamant that there wasn't going to be a sequel, but everyone's like, but we want to see that Melissa's happy. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. So it is a delight to get to write Melissa, because her life is so good. I can't write another story about her. There's nothing else to say. I love that she's too well adjusted to write a book about. Right? That's cool. Rick was a little harder in green because Rick is so quiet that I didn't know how to like put him in green very much. But writing Melissa is so much fun.
Right. Yeah, that I kind of had, that was one of my questions that I was going to ask if I had time was, have you ever thought about writing a sequel to one of the books that you have already published?
Well, I think what we call them are companion stories. Rick and Green are companions to Melissa, or they're all companions to each other, I guess, at this point.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. Do you feel like the attention from people challenging Melissa or other books has empowered the message, or has it taken attention away from its core ideas and themes? And that's a question from Juniper.
I think that I love when I get to talk about craft. And there are definitely times when I end up not like talking about the challenges supersedes getting to talk about writing the story and getting to talk about the process and getting to talk about how it's 12 years and what is it like to write, Melissa from a different point of view. These are the fun parts for me. So it's impacted things. I guess it's just, this is the world that I'm in. Like, of course it was going to happen. There was never a world in which it was going to not happen. So I can't imagine that world. I'm still having a tough time imagining the world in which the book got published, in which that I have as much support as I do. And in a world in which when a book about a trans kid gets challenged, most people are like, why would you do that? When I grew up in elementary school, they did not show us gay people on purpose, right? And if someone was a queer teacher, they would not say that. That was not safe to say. And I grew up in New York City in public schools. And now I go to schools to be queer on purpose. So, like, yeah, the bannings are happening, but the bannings are more like the wave, the hitting the shore. But the moon is what caused it, right? And like the other things are what caused it. Like, yeah, you can see the wave, but the wave isn't where the wave is just beware of it. Yeah, it can kill you. Like, don't ignore the tsunami, but don't think that the tsunami is what matters.
Okay. Oh, we got another question. Just a second. We got a couple from the audience. Here we go.
Hi. So I am a queer writer. I have a lot of queer writers in my life. And being, as you were saying, even just writing a book is always just hard. And I guess I was just wondering, because you present yourself with so much confidence and excitement. And I was just wondering if you had any words of courage for us.
Take breaks. I look like this now. Our stories are so vital. And yeah, I get junk sometimes, but I also get emails and comments and in-person things of people who they got to give the books to their kids, and their kid gets to be seen as a trans kid. Or I had someone who asked me to sign a book, and they were like, hey, I met you like 6 months ago at American Library Association when the book was coming out, and you signed it to my old name. Could you make this one out to me? So like a queer adult who found themselves in my book, and in that 6 months between when I saw them, pulled that all together. So like, you get to do that for people. It's unbelievable. Please give up 100 times. Give up 100 times. Pick it up 101.
Hey, we got another.
And that's what I do. Like
question.
right now, this is me picking it up. I give it up lots of times.
All right, let's see if this is gonna. Here we go. Here we go.
Hi, I have two questions. One is I'm retired, so it's been a while since I've been in middle school. Do such groups and social groups exist in middle schools now for LGBTQ?
Not everywhere, but there are absolutely rainbow spectrum GSA types groups at the middle school level. There are some at the elementary school level, fourth and fifth grade.
Thanks, awesome. Second question, how do you personally identify, and why did you choose a trans female character as for your first book?
So I'm genderqueer. I'm non-binary. I failed a girl. I failed a boy. I'm much better at being me. And when I was starting to write the book in 2003, the idea of a non-binary kid getting to knowing who they were, having enough access to information that they could see themselves and recognize it, was not on my radar. Was not, I don't think, on anyone's radar. So to me, the kid who would, in a world where the word transgender wasn't really available to most children, the kid who would be most likely to know who they were, and that who they were was not working, and that there was something else very easily accessible to be, would be a trans girl. Particularly because of the patriarchy. Anyone who wants to go down that ladder gets called out instantly. So if I had written about a girl who wanted to be a boy, people would go, oh yeah, like of course you'd want more power, subconsciously, right? So like there's a certain amount of space in the world for tomboy, which is not what trans boys are, but there's a space for that in some sense. But someone who the world has pegged as a white boy who wants to be femme, And she is a very traditional girl. Not all trans girls are like this, but she wants to wear skirts. She wants to be girly. She's a very girly girl. To me, that would be the kid who would figure it out very early. And I am delighted to be wrong in 2023 that there are all sorts of non-binary kids who know who they are. And that's who I'm writing now, because that is closer to who I am. But I was doing my own self-censorship. I was doing my own not knowing how the world could be, because that's where we were as a culture, right? When I started writing the book, the word trans wasn't in it because a fourth grader wouldn't find that. And by 2014, when I was, finishing it up, yeah, of course someone was going to find that word if they needed it. Thanks for asking.
Another question, this one from Brendan. Brendan says, thank you for Melissa and for standing up for changing the name of the book from George to Melissa. And Brennan is just curious about that whole process, how that came about, that the name got changed from George to Melissa.
Of course. So like I was saying, in 2003, when I was starting to work on the book, there was a different awareness of things. And the notion of dead naming, which is itself a complicated word because dead is not how we all feel about our names, but the idea that a trans person should always be called by their name. And in fact, the idea that their name is their name, not their chosen name or the name they prefer, is a relatively recent concept. It really only hit the trans culture in about 2015. And regularly, we are still fighting with newspaper reports where people will publish someone's dead name, their birth name, a name they don't want used for accuracy's sake. Ew, you're being inaccurate. You're not saying who I am. And so I was writing the book. When I was writing the book, I was calling it Girl George, which was funny 30 years ago, right? Boy George, flamboyant singer. 10-year-olds do not know about Boy George. And so, right, so Scholastic was like, well, that doesn't work. And they said something very interesting. They were like, well, if the word girl is on the cover, there are going to be some adults who don't recommend it to boys, who don't show it to boys. Not there are going to be boys who don't read it and self-censor, but there are going to be adult gatekeepers who assume the book is not for a boy because it says girl. And I was like, oh, sneaky feminism. Let's do it. And then I ended up getting a copy of the book and going, oh no, right? This is not what she wants to be called. What do I do? Contacted my editor and he's like, well, welcome to being in publishing, right? That's showbiz, kid. And I'm like, no. And several years later, I went to him and I'm like, it's bad, it's wrong. And he's like, yeah, well, it is. And then the pandemic hit and nothing mattered anymore. And I just took out my marker and I just started changing the copy I had, because trans culture is DIY, do it yourself. If they don't provide clothing that works for you, you make up your own outfits. If the title is wrong, you just start changing it. And I was at an outdoor event that happened that year, and I asked people, do you want me to change your copies? And I just started changing it. And then I wrote a blog post on a Friday, contacted my editor on a Monday, and I was like, hey, what's up? How you doing, David? Just want to let you know I put this. And he's like, yeah, we've gotten emails. Let's have a conversation. And in 2020, right, after several years, and I was able to put together, trans people have been told that we're too beautiful to change. Right. So I was told that, oh, the cover is iconic. It's lovely. It's beautiful. We can't change this beautiful cover. Yeah, literally, the beautiful cover. You have to change it if it hurts. And if we don't change it now, it's still going to be wrong. And it's still going to be wrong. And it's still going to be wrong. And it will always be wrong until we change it. And then we changed it. And 5 years from now, that's going to be how it's known. And that I'm just so glad that we got there.
Oh, okay. We got a question. Someone from the back of the room is coming forward. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Amanda. More a comment. My daughter got your book, Jilly P, for Easter, and she devoured it in, I think, like a week. And then the next thing I know is, Mom, do they have other books? And then summer, we took up camping, and she devoured the rest of the series in a week, I think. So, but she's a little sixth grader. She's finding her way. She's struggling with school because middle school is terrible at times. But it was just such a nice thing for her to have. And so now I have to go buy green.
Well, I love that. And can I say that I love that your kid likes Jilly P? Because my other books are all mostly about queer kids getting to be themselves and the straight people are helpful to them. And so you either get to like see yourself and be seen, or you're like, oh, I'd be an alliance. I'd be one of the good guys. Jilly P is a white hearing girl who has deaf and black people in her life, and she messes up. And she has to learn to recover, and she has to learn to make mistakes and then survive, right? She is in a place of privilege, and it's her responsibility to stand up even after she's fallen down. She can't just like give up. That's a harder story to enjoy. So I appreciate that.
Any other questions from the audience? I have one last question for you. If my question would be, if you were to because I think that some middle school schools are going to be watching this interview since we're recording it and everything.
I'm so glad I didn't curse.
We would have bleeped you out. We would have tried to anyway.
It's like it's all adults in the room, but it's on record.
But my question or request is, what kind of advice would you give if there's a middle schooler who's watching this who is really struggling with identity and gender, and that what kind of advice would you give that student?
A couple pieces. First of all, have a safe place to go to if and when you need it. Hopefully that is a person or people that you can talk to. Might be friends, might be family, might be a hotline. It can be a journal, though a journal can't talk back to you and help you in that kind of way. But having that space set so that you know you have it, because that you can have a bad day. Things can go bad. You deserve that space. So make it for yourself ahead of time. Figure out who those people would be. If you don't know who you are, welcome to the party, right? We are learning things about ourselves all the time. And if we're not learning things about ourselves, it's because we've shut down. Adults will act like they know all the things forever. They're playing a game with you. We're figuring things out as we go. You don't need to know now. In fact, knowing that you don't know is a fabulous place to be in. None of the words working, it's kind of annoying and it kind of is unpleasant, but it is so much better than forcing yourself into words that don't work. What else did I want to say? You get to change how you call yourself a bunch of times till you find the one that works. And that one that works can change a bunch of times. And you are not beholden to share that information. You do not have to share that information with anyone who you do not want to. You are not lying. It is not a secret. It is private information that you get to choose whom and when and how you share it with. That's what I got to say.
Oh, thank you, Alex. Thank you. Oh, you want to say you have another question, or? Okay, here we go.
I appreciate you creating such books for kids, but have you thought about or considered having a book that would help an adult or parent in some way help their child?
I'm going to say no. First of all, I don't write nonfiction, and I certainly don't write fiction for adults. Fiction for adults is long and boring. My focus is on the trans kids. My focus is on the trans people. That's where my heart is. That's who my people are. I will let some well-meaning cisgender nice person, probably a white lady, write to other well-meaning cisgender people, probably white ladies, about how they can support their kids. That's not my job. My job is to censor the trans kids. But thanks for asking.
Oh, you want another? Here we go.
A follow-up question, I guess. With that in mind, are there books that you've run into or would recommend for a parent that is looking? I can think of one, Love Lives Here. I don't know if you've
Sure.
seen that book.
I'm not a trans parent, so I don't know. Or rather, I should say I'm not. Trans parents are trans people, not the parents of trans kids. I'm not the parent of trans kids, so I don't know. I would recommend get books for trans kids.
I see. Thank you.
Hmm.
Any other questions or comments for Alex? Okay. Well, thank you again, Alex. It has been a privilege and an honor to have you here. I should stand, have you here. I'm using the air quotes at Peter White Public Library. And why don't we all give Alex a huge hand for what they do. Thank you so much for your books. Thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for your kindness.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Then thank you everybody for coming.
Good night.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much, Alex. I'm sure that I want to have you back when you're, with Green and that. So we'll talk. Okay.
I love it.
All right.
right.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care. Good night.
Bye-bye.